Hello and welcome back to Valverde Broadcasting. We are not dead. The illusion that we were dead was basically my fault. We're back talking about Terminator Zero, because we know you love Terminator content, and some of you hate that we do Terminator content, but, you know, people watch it. Terminator Zero, Duncan Casey, is an animated series for Netflix based on the Terminator franchise of films, produced by Skydance, who really took a shit in our brains with the last two films. Now, I've done a bit of research, and I'm just going to kind of lay out what we know to you, and you're sort of reacting to it, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea.
I've seen. I saw some images and stuff, but
you saw the images. Okay, yeah. Okay. I'm going to lay down the main things. I'll lay down the main things. So it's an anime. So it's produced by It's written by an American called Mattson Tomlin, who's written some Batman stuff and a few other bits. It's produced and directed in Japan, Japanese animation studio. So it's very much an anime from an American script. The thing that people are kind of a little bit freaked out over is that he has specifically said, Mattson Tomlin, that basically, when I give you the exact quote in the term in the interest of journalistic kind of integrity, we're not going to pretend that the third movie didn't happen. We're not going to pretend that the sixth movie didn't happen. So he's basically saying it's including all of the films in continuity. That's the controversial thing. Now, the thing is, it's set in 1997, 2 days before Judgment Day, right? So I think that's a way of saying we're not going to say they did happen, but we're not going to say. I think it's just ignoring them, personally.
It is in a way saying they didn't happen, because isn't the contention of 3 that it got delayed?
Yeah,
and then so it is. But and then also Dark Fate is ignoring everything. So
if it ends before it happens, if it ends before Judgment Day happens,
so the series is just about 2 days, is it?
Also, I wonder if it's timey-wimey. I think that's how you include all of those. You have a line of dialogue about, like, oh, there are different timelines. You go, oh, right, fair enough. So the thing about this is that I find quite interesting. So it's about someone in Japan who's developing an AI, and Skynet sends a Terminator back to get him because it's going to be an AI, I guess, that rivals Skynet. Right. I kind of like that it's removed any Connors. No Connors, new thing. It sounds a bit like those kind of 90s Dark Horse comics, which, you know, would be often about a random person having to fight a Terminator, which I'm all for. I like the visual style. It is an anime. What I like, and there's a quote here that I'm going to feed you, which I think you're going to enjoy. I don't know why I'm so happy-go-lucky today. I don't know what's going on to make me positive about a thing, particularly a Terminator thing.
I mean, it's raining outside.
And it's raining. It is. It was. You see how I'm pink? That's because mistakes were made on Saturday when it was sunny. Right. Yeah, I look like a sort of squeezed angry bollock. So, what I like, and I'll couch this for you, the marketing and the imagery they've released and the kind of graphics on Netflix very much lean into the first movie. Have you noticed that? It's the kind of red laser lines and stuff, and it's kind of very...
I think I said to you, didn't I, fallen afoul of thinking that was the first I get in a drunken state on a Friday night, gone, ooh, and then it's not.
Oh, I'll watch the Terminator. Oh no, I won't. Yeah. This is a quote from Mattson Tomlin, which I really like, because I've said this before. I think you said this before, and I know your feelings about the first film. There is a completely valid version of the Terminator franchise where the Terminator is synonymous with Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, where he's this unrelenting serial killer. There's a little bit of Friday the 13th in there. There's a bit of Michael Myers from Halloween in there. Absolutely. The first movie is, you know, if the franchise goes in a different direction, it's a stalk and slash horror film. It does it in a different way, but it came out at a similar time. It's about an unstoppable monster hunting a teenage girl. You know, so someone recognizing that, because if you were to then take, I can't remember who wrote Terminator Genesis, but I don't think they would say anything like that. They would say the best thing about the Terminator is about how he done a falling out of a helicopter, or you know what I mean?
There's 1,000 monkeys at 1,000 typewriters, I think.
Yeah. So these are the facts. I could get into the kind of story in detail, but I don't see the point. Matt, you know, what do you think of all the things that I've laid out to you?
I think it's changing format instills a slight degree of optimism, I suppose, because it's, like you say, it's kind of leaning into that Dark Horse Comics world, which is fine. At this point, it's kind of like, okay, like, here we fucking go.
Sure, who cares?
I sort of, I kind of having, because I because of the aforementioned frustration I've had thinking this was the Terminator, and it's not even this, it's just like an announcement for it.
And there's a shit teaser, which, there's I hate those teasers where it's like, we just made a video of the logo.
Yeah. It's shite. I bought the first one and watched it sort of in 2 bits over the weekend, and and I'm like, that's the Terminator. That's what this should be. But it's, so I think if they sort of play in that arena, great. But I mean, and it's just like any Terminator material now. I struggle to give a shit. I really do. I mean, it's fine. It's great. I'm good for them, and I hope it's a success. I really do. I'm not angry at them for anything. I'm glad they're trying something different. But it's, it's kind of like...
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Well, all the images, it's the standard Terminator fare, except in animation. So it's kind of like a Terminator with half its face blown off. It's kind of like, fine.
I like how it's all lit.
Yeah.
It looks like noir, which has been missing from the Terminator since the Terminator, let's face it.
For sure.
And I like, so there's, there's drawings of things that look reminiscent of the first movie, and I think it has a strong identity, which I think is something. So, for example, straight into Terminator 3, I think it has no identity. It looks like television. Terminator Salvation, one of the things I've always respected about it is it has an identity, and then this kind of has that, which is intriguing to me. I do think. So to dovetailing from you, our expectations are so low here. It's just kind of fine. You just sort of do whatever, and if it's good, great. But if it isn't, fine. We'll just put it on the par with the rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we'll just chuck it on there. So the one thing that I've been really, really enthusiastic about was, and this is going into cross-media Terminator stuff, I thought the Terminator video game, Terminator Resistance, was utterly fantastic. And I've been borne out by that because the same studio made the RoboCop Rogue City game, and everyone loved it. And it's like, guys, go back and play Terminator Resistance. It's fantastic. It honours the source material so brilliantly. So I'm like, cross-media Terminator shit. All right, cool. I'll take it. I'll take it until I've watched it.
Do you know what I think? I think the problem with Terminator, as opposed to something like RoboCop has such a strong identity in terms of the world the character inhabits. The character himself is obviously very distinctive. Whereas with Terminator, I think the problem with the Terminator is we struggled with its general, stuff outside of the events of that first film and maybe the second film, but really the first film is essentially, it's about a man it is about a serial killer. It's about what looks like a man stalking someone. And yes, all the backstory and lore. Feel grubby saying that word. All the kind of, like, I think I've said this a million times, I think, on this channel, but it's like Judgment Day, the war, John Connor, like all these things that are in the future. In the first film, there are things that are talked about and sort of shown, but they
should remain mythical. I think we've said that before.
They're a thing to avoid or a thing to protect. That's all they are. But you can't start going. But the amount of people who call for these films that are set in the future war. I mean, we had one, but it's like, or in the war, the one that's depicted in the first 2 films. It's like, what is that? It's just a war. So, and
this is the thing. I think it's in. I think as we've said before, these are things that exist in the abstract, and you should never really see John Connor as John Connor, the Christ figure, right? You see him as a child, so you don't. You should never see that. These things are interesting because they exist in the abstract. It's like the Clone Wars. Like, we were all better off before we knew what that meant, honestly. And I can hear the fucking Star Wars fans descending. But
the jungle drums are going.
Yeah, that's it. So I just to eject, because someone will say, but you like Terminator Resistance. Yeah, but that's a video game. A video game's different because I'm not watching the war, I'm playing the war. And Terminator Resistance lent so heavily into the first 2 movies. And that game did well to keep John Connor at a distance. You meet him at the very end and you do the scene. Remember the grown-up... Do you remember? Of course you remember. The grown-up John Connor from the start of Terminator 2, right? You meet him at the end. He does a brief bit of dialogue and then you go and do a fight and then he speaks to you again. It ends. You're not him. You don't play as him. You don't hang out with him. Like he's kept at arm's length, and he's kept as kind of almost in the abstract, and that's the way it should be. And it's kind of like, oh, we want to see the future, and it's like, I kind of think you do, you know, and with good reason as well. I mean, I'm not saying you're dumb for wanting that, because I hate that. I hate when people go, "Oh, stupid for wanting that." It's like, no, very valid too, but.
Yeah, no, and all that really says is that this was such a great thing that you know, it left you wanting more. But that surely, you know, I think people need to sort of have a word with themselves and go, that's a good thing, not the more, you know. But I think, you know, whereas Seeker's Terminator is naturally, as a story, it's about someone out, or two people out of time in a, you know, fishes out of water, and RoboCop isn't. RoboCop is set in a very distinctive world with distinctive stuff, and so you can expand that. It's again, because it is sort of based on Judge Dredd, isn't it, or 2000 AD,
or heavily inspired, or however you want to. Yeah,
that's the world, you know. So it's kind of like you could do so much with that, and that they don't, but you know, you could. And it's a distinctive thing. Like RoboCop is a distinctive thing. The Terminator isn't, except it's Arnold Schwarzenegger all the time, but it wouldn't be.
Yeah, except for when it isn't, when and then they have to crowbar in a CGI one or whatever. Like, you know, it's and I think it might. So just for credit, I've pulled up, like, the wiki, the fucking Reddit threads. I've pulled up the Entertainment Weekly. I think I referenced already where the interview was with the writer, and I've pulled up a few bits here. And someone somewhere said, you know, you can't just keep repeating Terminator 2 over and over again, which was kind of, we've had many variations of that. And fair play to Terminator Salvation, still shit, but it doesn't do that. That's what I always respected about it, is it kind of does its own thing. Yeah. Because even, like, despite Terminator Dark Fate relentlessly shitting on Terminator 2, it still repeats Terminator 2, essentially. And I kind of, I always kind of dug those kind of old Dark Horse comics that were kind of like, oh, well, here's some guy who's, like, they were always like, this guy's supposed to invent a type of valve that gets used in Skynet, and to him it's just a job that he did at his firm. And then the Resistance sends someone to kill him, and like I mean, it's like stuff like that. It's like of switcheroos, and it's a random guy, and no one mentions the Connors, and it's set in, like, I think there was a Terminator series like set in Death Valley or something. Like it's all stuff like that. And I remember a few different ones that come along, and it's kind of like, yeah, these are kind of they keep the important stuff in the abstract, you know. And I kind of like this.
Because I agree with you, but the time travel, and we've discussed this before, but it's that thing of, like, the first film is so nice because of its cyclical nature. Everything is it, you know, that there's the no fate thing, but actually the film, you know, shows that all this stuff is predetermined by itself, you know. And
the original ending was a loop, right? We were supposed to see Cyberdyne Systems. It was supposed to be a closed loop, right?
Well, and it sort of is anyway, because you get that Carl's thing about the picture of Sarah, and he says, "I always wondered what you were thinking about." Yeah, that was taken, and actually it was him. She was thinking of him, because in the voiceover she's still blah, blah, blah. And so it's closed, it's done. It's like, yeah, you are the blah 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 blah, done. Like, it's really that. But you know, that's why I sort of, the older I get, the more of a problem I have with T2. Fun though it is, but you know, again, fine to join in.
Fine to join in. Probably me next.
Yeah. But you know, it's so I struggle. It's the same thing with things like Predator. It's, you know, because these are all things that are contextually, you know, bound up in what they were in that film. They're brilliantly integrated, but a lot of them it's just design, or it's like, you know, in order for the Terminator to have any kind of weight, it has to have this thing that's coming behind it that has, you know, themes and feels real. But that's the problem. I feel like people like Stan Winston and James Cameron, they all did these great jobs of really thinking about these things and what they would be and giving them physicality and weight. But what that's done in a frankly creatively bankrupt era is it's just like, it's given people like all this shit. Like, we've got to keep talking about how the Terminator got its hump or whatever. And it's like, do something else, fuck's sake. You know, I'm just sort of like, yeah, but I agree with you, like, in the sense of, you can explore those themes from the perspective of someone else in another place, in another time, sure. Like, you know, create a different world then in which that can exist, maybe.
Right.
I don't.
I'm just
gonna, fuck it off and do something else.
You know, this is going to cost me nothing to watch, right? Because I don't pay for the Netflix here, someone else does, so it's going to cost me nothing to watch. Can I chuck an episode on when it comes out on Judgment Day and just be like, cool, no, or cool, yes, and I'm kind of viewing this as sort of harmless which is weird because you kind of shouldn't. I don't know. Like, I think the frustration is like when they bring the cast back and spend all the money and they make a shit one. You're like, well, movies are like moonshots, right? You know, they're way harder to pull off. Whereas something animated like this, you know, you can do it on a lower budget. You can take your time. You don't have to attract like aging former A-list actors or anything like that. Like, I think there's more creative freedom in it. I'm choosing to think it might be all right. I want like an animated Dark Horse comic from the 90s type thing. So there's something quite funny in here which I quite liked. Is in the so it's set in Japan but it's written by an American, and he was like, so I had this bit, all these Terminators kick off. Now this does sound a bit weird though, and how this is going to play out. But there's a bit where a Terminator kicks off, so everyone just grabs their guns and goes after him. And then the Japanese studio went, we don't have guns in Japan, and we wouldn't know where to get them. So, like, they have to like not have guns, including the Terminator, because there just aren't guns in Japan.
Right.
So
katanas then?
What he did say a thing about swords, and I was like, well, good luck.
Really?
Like, good luck. Like, oh yeah,
no, they've got walking around. Fucking...
They've got spoons. Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't... But
well, it is. I mean, that is interesting, and that is something that, you know. Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I agree with you. I mean, like you say, it doesn't. The stakes are much lower. It's the kind of thing like I wish they would do the kind of Prey treatment to Terminator. You know, I would not set it in fucking, you know,
it'd be amazing.
The prairies, but
versus pirates or something.
You're John Connor. Jebediah Sprungfield.
There was that Harry. Sorry, I won't sidetrack you too much. There was remember the Harry Enfield sketch where it was like was it? No, it's set in like the 1920s or something, and it's like the Terminator in a Merchant Ivory film. And it's like, oh, Mr. Terminator, you used the wrong knife, and everything, like all that, like they're playing croquet and shit.
That's right, yeah. But no, what I mean is do something just lower key, lower budget, lower. Yeah, if you've got to do it, it's what I thought they were doing with Genesis. I remember back in, and I think it was on the cards to be a remake rather than a sequel, and then they obviously kind of did both, kind of sort of not quite, you know.
Well, they kind of spoke about it like it was Back to the Future too, and I thought, oh, is it going to be characters kind of glimpsing events from those films? It's like, nope, we're going to remake them shot by shot with people who look completely different for no reason.
But then pop a squat and take a huge dump on them.
Cleveland steamer, yeah.
Yeah, so I you know, I think yeah, I think you could do that. You could do it in live action. I would love to see another one in live action, but not big smashy crashy nonsense. Like you could do it, like I say, like Prey style, where it's like really go back to like the idea of the sort of Lance Henriksen T-800. You know, like
well, that's what I think this has a bit of that based on what I can see of the Terminator. There's like a kind of thin bloke in a suit, and it's like and that's what I liked about the comics would do that as well. It would just be like a bloke. Sort of some huge geezer, like, you know, it's just like a guy in a suit, and it could be anyone. That was the point, right? It could be anyone, and that's what makes it frightening. Because someone could just walk out of a crowd and start shooting at you or whatever. I mean, I don't know what something I would. Oh God, this is going to sound so trite coming to me, but I put it on the other day. The Terminator 1, as that man once got angry at us for saying, and I put it on a projector in the front room. And it was for a project that I was going to work on that kind of fell through. But we had a similar scene to the Terminator. It was a man stalking kind of a young woman in a kind of not a nightclub. It was like a laser quest because they were like kids. And I was like, well, hold on a minute. Like, this is tech noir. Like, I'm going to watch this and remind myself how this film is put together, because I kind of got to that complacent point where it's kind of, I don't need to watch it anymore. I watched it through my aging 40-year-old eyes, and with all the hindsight of having now worked in a senior role on big films, right? Like, so it's a fucking phenomenal movie, and not just because I like cool robots, like the way it's edited. It's so quick.
I noticed that on my last watch round, the editing, especially the choice of shots coming in there. Sorry, go on.
But I agree, the second unit stuff, all the inserts and things like the pace. Watch it again and just see how quick and how kinetic it is as a film without being shaky cam and without being kind of MTV-ish and without being kind of jittery. It manages to throw in these, like, sometimes I think less than a second shots of like second unit stuff of, like, you know, muzzle, like gun muzzles that looks like a willy, but like you just get a close up with their kind of like so quickly and things scattering across the floor and stuff like that. And I've said before that I really like the film The Guest, and it reminded me of The Terminator. And I thought, oh, I'm going to watch the Halloween. The end of The Guest is the kind of stalking through the Halloween high school thing, and I watched it and went, oh, no. Thus vindicating you, I think. But I was just kind of like,
I didn't get it when you said that. I enjoyed The Guest very much, and I kind of understood what you meant, but yeah, I didn't.
It's fallen apart for me. I do. It is cribbing, I think, and then it's doing Halloween. It's doing John Carpenter. I think it's mostly doing Halloween and John Carpenter. But I was kind of like, I remembered it having that thing, and it kind of does because it's the guy stalking them. But that applies to the general slasher thing that this guy said. But I was just like, yeah, the way this is shot and edited, and I'm not, you know, I'm not fucking James Cameron and Mark Goldblatt either. It's not an easy thing to pull off. But I was watching The Guest. I was kind of like, yeah, shit, it really is such a deeply superior movie, like in every sense. And as a kind of, at the time, low budget, kind of slightly guerrilla-ish thing, it's an astonishingly prodigious piece of work. And people are just like, you're just a fanboy. It's like, no, I do this for a job now. I know how the fucking sausage is made. It's an astonishing film. And I don't think I would have been able to articulate this until about 2 years ago, or till now.
I agree. I mean, certainly from, like, one thing I appreciated about it on the last watch that I did, which was the most recent one, which was, I think, this weekend I watched it in 2 bits. But it was things like, these are things that don't get me wrong, it's often cited as a really low budget film, and but it's still 6 point whatever million. You know,
it was in the millions.
Yeah. It's not like it wasn't
tiny. But
yeah,
they stretched that by doing stuff without permits and whatnot. It's one of those kind of cases.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there was a lot of guerrilla filmmaking going on. But I think to have, I mean, and this speaks to James Cameron's broader thing of like his fanaticism about planning shots, understanding the story he's telling, the themes he's exploring. Like, he's very, very fastidious with all that. And it was things like I noticed on like the car chase after they get out of Tech Noir and they're in the cars getting away. I can't remember because I was drunk, but I did notice like there was a shot of Sarah, even just the shots of her, the sort of profile shots in the car, married with the Terminator's profile shots driving the car, and just like, there's loads of really, really cool little visual storytelling things in there that are, you know, just so well done, and it's so clear. It's so clear that was the vision. You know, I mean, even though I know he changed things about who the Terminator was and what he looked like, and stuff,
but that was all in the in the lead up. You know, that was all in the build up to this, rather than you know, because I think they knew what they were making when they made it.
Yes,
you know. So it's just fucking astonishing. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, okay. Mark Goldblatt did The Terminator. I thought so. I worked with him once, and I just wanted to talk about. Dead Heat. It's his much maligned, forgotten zombie cop film. Really, I should have been like, you shot this. Well, we were there to talk about his second unit stuff on RoboCop.
Okay.
But yeah, like, he's just one of the most incredible editors that's ever worked. But it's just, and I do think the way that film's edited, because like you say, there's those match cuts with the kind of profiles of the car and stuff, and what I really
stuff on eyes,
loads of stuff on eyes, and eyes are a big motif in that movie. Like close-ups of someone shoots at something, you get a close-up of like cold sparks like wanging off of a car. Or, do you know what I mean? It's got those little kind of bits of detail in it that it's largely through editing second unit, I think. So there's a cartoon coming out that's just wanking off the Terminator, but there is a cartoon coming out. I'm denigrating. I'm being facetious by pointing at a cartoon. That's not what I think. But there's nothing wrong with the term cartoon. But it's an animated thing. Like, people are probably going to get stabbed or bummed or whatever. I don't know.
Well, there are no guns, so I mean,
there are no guns. Yeah, so stabbings ahoy. I'm like, yeah, it's hard for me to. I'm not excited about it, but I'm like, all right, because I'm so inoculated to bad Terminator things. It's like, yeah, just take another dump on my chest. I don't care. I can't even smell it anymore.
Well, look, it's in the era of streaming. I think this is the way things ought to go, really. You know, because it's kind of like, It's doing these big tentpole releases, and that cost 300 million or whatever. It's like, what? Who? Why? It's just going to end up on streaming. It doesn't have the weight behind it. You're far too concerned about things that you just do things by the numbers because you can't take risks and you can't. And look at the stuff that's been, if not, I mean, it's hard to say, it's hard to quantify in terms of returns, but certainly the stuff that's been the most sort of critically successful that's playing in these bloody like franchises, you know, that are being sort of sequels or prequels or whatever, which I wish we could get away from, but the fact of the matter is we're stuck in that groundswell of it. The ones that have been most successful critically have been the ones that just stripped it back to its bare essence and did something new, interesting, but thematically, you know, solid. And that's what they've got to do. They've got to do it. I don't know why that lesson can't be learned. But maybe it is, you know, maybe, and this is something like an anime or whatever, fantastic, because you know what, we're going to see it from a different point of view. It's probably going to be cool. It's probably going to have cool, like, stuff. And if you say it's tipping its hat to the first film, I think that's a good idea. So,
it seems to be, and I think the noises that are being made are thus, you know. So I don't know. It might be good. I think we've spun the wheels on this. And that's enough of that, in the words of Clint Eastwood. Yeah. So, what do you think about Terminator Zero? Why don't you leave a comment? Why don't you draw a picture and post it to us at PO Box Bumhole? I don't know what's going on. But I say that, but there are people like Sean and Dan in our midst who do go and draw amazing things when we say stuff.
It's true.
So look, I've got Jeff Coates' Foxy Flingo on the wall behind me. That's what that is.
Nice.
In fact, there's a triptych of Dan Lyle's originals floating behind me. Right, so that's it. I'm saying goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.